Invisible City is an installation about individual and collective memories of life during 1950 to 1970 in Thailand. Growing up in Thailand, my sister and I were always sent to our grandma during our school break. My grandma didn't have a chance to go to middle school since compulsory education when she was young, covered only until the 4th grade. Anyways, my grandma's always loved to read and loved to buy all kinds of books and magazines when she can. And here at Grandma's is where I first ran into one of the most controversial books in Thailand. The book is about the dissenting opinion of the death case of King Rama VIII, who is the older brother of Thailand's most beloved king, the late King Bhumibol Adulyadej. Thailand was under lèse majesté law since forever. Lèse majesté law means to do wrong to majesty, which is the law mainly written to protect the dignity of the reigning sovereign. Though the law has been vaguely applied by the junta government and the pro-monarchy to use as a political weapon to censor and silence people. These photos show parts of an exhibition to remember the Masad massacre event happening in 1976, which was a violent crackdown by Thai police and lynching by right-wing paramilitaries against the lefties, protester and student, by which this event has only been mentioned roughly in just a few paragraphs in my school history books. The more I aware that Thai history was written in a very narrow perspective, the more I realized that how important it is to keep the record of individual memories. Even though keeping a record of one's own thoughts and activities in diary form are hardly practiced in Thailand, there are some specific genre of printed literature called cremation volumes, which is actually a funeral books that are commemorative book given as a gift to the guests at Thai funeral. Cremation volumes are usually include a biograph of the deceased, even in his or her lifetime, and even some selected folklore, poems, or even local knowledge, which is contained in first-hand information that can provide reflection and underlying social structure of the time. Anyway, the cremation volumes are sometimes pretty hard to read, and it's because it's written sometimes in the old Thai language, and the topics are scattered into many volumes. Therefore, I asked myself, how can I use technology to help me share these individual memories and also add more memories of my generation to engage younger people? The most important things for me in this project is that I want to focus on the story of people who experience social invisibility. By following the concept of cremation volume from my research, I interview parents of Thai immigrants and asylees in New York and asked them to share their memories and stories of the good old days with me. My first initial concept is literally playing with the word invisibility by placing each record from the interview in an empty room and ask the visitor to explore the space using Kinect to track the position of each visitor. Due to the pandemic, I only have a chance to taste with my first concept with just only a couple friends. And that feedback basically suggested that I need to improve more on the scope of the story that I want to focus and also some visitor experience. For example, one of the person that I interviewed, she's pretty old and she speaks very slow. That made my friends confused with her long pause as an end of the stories. Also, some stories that I interview and cut are too long. And a suggestion that I have is that maybe I might need another factor of or experience that appear to be more playful to attract younger generation. I have always interested in relationship between light and shadows. And here are some of the projects that I explore at ITP. From the feedback that I got, I realized that I might need some kind of time element that are able to suggest my visitor when the story start or when the story end. But I also want to use the same something that is very subtle, that is still able to go along with the initial concept. I decided to take video sculpture class with Gabe in order to explore more about light and shadow for my thesis. And with the help from my partner, shout out to Jing Yao Shao for everything that you help. We managed to create augmented shadow that are able to control the position of the shadow and also the movement, of which I later will apply to my thesis installation. The technical part of this is that the shadow are rendered from Unity 3D, and then edit in After Effects and project from the projector from the underneath to fit with the position of the object sitting on top of the pedestal. The position of the visitor will be tracked by the Kinect, in which Isadora will also connect to control the position and the movement of the shadows. With the feedback that mentioned about long pause and like maybe adding more playful experience, I categorized, re-interviewed, and recut and re-edit the sound, then carefully select and put each interview together in a story set for a dining conversation to add more storyline that is easier to follow. The visitors are invited to explore around the dining table to listen to each story from the invisible person that inhabited in the room randomly or sequentially by following the suggested shadow. The full installation will take about 20 minutes, which is the visitor will have to walk around the table for 3 rounds and listen to all the stories. The story will start when the visitor moves closer to the specific distance from the table, which will be tracked by the overhead camera connected to Isadora. And the shadow will start to turn and act like a timer for each stories. And there will also be a time that the visitor are able to play and control the shadows as a break from the listening to the conversation. And here's the video demo from the installation.
สมัยแม่คนไทยยังไม่รู้จักวันเกิดหรือให้ความสัมพันธ์กับวันเกิดเหมือนสมัยนี้หรอกวันเกิดก็เหมือนกับวันธรรมดาวันหนึ่งผ่านไปอาจจะลืมซะด้วยซ้ำและแม่ก็ไม่ได้อยู่กับพ่อแม่อยู่กับญาติเขาก็ไม่ได้ให้ความสนใจหรือให้ความสำคัญกับวันเกิดของเราและตัวเราเองก็ไม่ได้มีความพิเศษอะไรก็เลยไม่ได้ให้ความสำคัญกับวันเกิดเหมือนกันเราก็จะเห็นแต่วันพิเศษก็คือวันพิธีเฉลิมพระชนพรรษาของในหลวงกับราชินีแล้วก็พวกคนชั้นสูงคนรวยสาวไฮโซที่มีการจัดงานวันเกิดกันแต่เราจะมาให้ความสำคัญอีกทีก็คือตอนที่เรามีลูกแล้วนั่นแหละ
คนเป็นอยู่ยังไงอ่ะชาวบ้านลำบากนะชาวบ้านน้องแวงเนี่ยแต่ก่อนไม่มีไฟฟ้าใช้ตะเกียงเนี่ยก็คือบางทีก็ตะเกียงใบใหญ่